Devon had developed a disdain for people constantly seeking favors from him. It always felt like that was one of the only reasons they kept him around. And it never felt like a request or even appreciated. He felt continually utilized, but there was something different when the request came from Grendel. It hovered in an ambiguous space, leaving him unsure whether it was an improvement or a regression. Pulling up alongside the instructed spot, he scanned the area but found no sign of him. Yet, he was certain Victoria's apartment was only a few blocks down. His stomach plummeted at this realization. He chided himself for holding on to nonsensical notions about Grendel. It wasn't like he mattered to him. He mattered to no one. Confused and unsure of his next move, he glanced around when his phone suddenly began to ring. Answering it only deepened his confusion. "What do you mean you're behind the dumpster?" Devon questioned, shutting off the car's engine before stepping out. Moments later, he found himself standing over Grendel, who indeed was wedged between a wall and the dumpster. "Holy shit, you look awful," Devon blurted out upon seeing Grendel. His initial shock stemmed from Grendel's appearance. Half of his face was stained with black and red. A deep gash marred his features, stretching from mid-cheek up past his eyebrow. However, it didn't take long for Devon to realize it was far worse than that. His clothes were torn and stained in multiple places, the dark substance making it challenging to discern the extent of the damage. Grendel forced a smile. "Well, it's good to know the outside matches the inside." He raised his hands weakly. "Help me up, I'm having a hard time moving." "Please." Flashing a quick pout for good measure. Devon knelt down. "Only because you said please," he teased, endeavoring to aid Grendel. However, with his initial attempt, Grendel cried out in pain. The wound produced a ripping sound as a mixture of black and red fluids trickled out, causing Grendel to collapse onto the ground. Initially attributing the putrid odor to the nearby trash, Devon now realized it emanated from Grendel's wounds. Standing over Grendel, Devon hesitated, fearful of causing more pain by touching him. On closer inspection, it became apparent that the black liquid was slowly eating away at the flesh surrounding the initial wound. "All right," Grendel waved his hands, attempting to catch his breath. "Let's try that again, shall we?" Devon readied himself and reached down for Grendel once more. Despite the scream of pain, he managed to lift Grendel off the ground this time, albeit with a few faltering steps. Grendel clung to him tightly as they both tried to recalibrate. Once the two of them were in the car, Devon couldn't help but notice the change in Grendel. He never in a million years imagined he would see him in such a state. Grendel's eyes were cold and empty, and his body had started to tremble that consumed his entire body. Devon lingered a second or two longer watching Grendel. "I'll have it cleaned," Grendel said in a defeated tone. "Oh, thanks," Devon began to respond before realizing what Grendel meant. Only then did he notice the various liquids seeping into the seat. However, his greater concern was the tremors passing through Grendel. He started to worry. What if this killed him? He certainly smelled like death. "Don't worry about the car. You look like you're in a lot of pain." Grendel shot him a sidelong glance. "No, I just..." He stopped, too fatigued to even attempt a joke. "I have some pain meds. I don't know how much it will help but..." Devon trailed off, still met with Grendel's exhausted expression. "They wouldn't work on me," Grendel said. "Not unless you take them first and let me." Grendel attempted a smile for a brief moment before his expression fell flat again. Devon grasped the side of his neck, eyes widening in fear as he quickly shook his head. That was a foolish question, forgetting how the C.R.O.W worked. If other drugs and alcohol needed to be absorbed into a human's blood before affecting them, then his Tylenol wouldn't be any different. Grendel sighed, resting his head against the window. "I just want to go home," he said, chewing at his bottom lip, on the verge of tears as he gazed out the window. Devon started up the car, passing Victoria's apartment building. He stopped himself from asking another futile question and stole a glance at Grendel during a red light. Piecing things together, he realized he'd now have to refer to the building in the past tense. The black liquid was the blood of the Necrorbist, a weapon famously used by C.R.O.W. Guilt washed over Devon. First, for foolishly feeling jealous of Victoria when he had arrived. Then, the realization that she was dead and he was now aiding the person responsible. But what troubled him most was that, despite knowing Grendel had just taken the life of another being, his primary concern was for Grendel's well-being. He had come to terms with the knowledge that he was on that list. Devon understood he was living on borrowed time, aware that eventually, either by Grendel's hand or C.R.O.W's, his time would run out. Yet, every time he encountered a red light or even a stop sign, Devon seized the opportunity to steal a glance at Grendel. With each glance, Grendel appeared worse. The shaking grew more violent, his complexion turned pastier, and the blood that managed to seep through the black substance on his skin became more vivid. It was difficult to comprehend how much damage Victoria had inflicted on him. She was only human, and Grendel had demonstrated on several occasions that his strength far surpassed theirs. However, perhaps raw strength didn't hold as much significance as training. In television, becoming a vampire was often portrayed as granting mastery in various fighting styles. This incident seemed to contradict that notion. Merely gaining more power didn't guarantee expertise in using it. Devon pondered what kind of human Grendel had been. It was evident he wasn't a fighter, even now. Devon was certain that without his supernatural abilities, Grendel would be easily bested by a wet paper bag. The remainder of the ride was silent. The issue arose when they arrived at the hotel. Given Grendel's condition, going through the front entrance wasn't an option. Instead, they had to use the back entrance. This route proved to be both lengthier and filled with narrower hallways. Maneuvering through these cramped passages and staircases with a K.A.S.E.C.M. who appeared half-dead was no simple task. Devon assumed it would be easier once they reached the hotel room. However, he was mistaken. The wounds remained unable to heal completely, instead, parts had slowly begun to dry, making their removal more challenging. Every attempt to undress Grendel was met with a weak cry of pain. By the time they managed to get him into the shower, he was too exhausted to stand. He sat at the shower's base, curled up as the water cascaded over him. Despite several attempts to assist, Grendel swatted Devon away, seemingly disoriented and unaware of his surroundings. After a substantial duration, about 20 to 50 minutes, allowing the water to cleanse the grime from his skin, Grendel began to regain some semblance of himself. The wounds, although more visible now and larger than before, remained open, with the tar-like substance trapped between his muscles. Gradually, the uncontrollable shaking subsided, and color slowly returned to his face. Though still curled up, he seemed to regain some awareness of his surroundings. Remaining cautious, Devon stayed close to the doorframe, mindful of the last time they were in that room and keen to avoid a repeat. There was some blood seeping from the cuts, but far less than Devon had anticipated. He wanted to believe this was a positive sign, yet a nagging feeling in the back of his mind suggested otherwise. "Can I help?" Devon inquired upon noticing Grendel picking at the remaining black substance lodged in the gaping wounds, swiftly turning away as soon as any red liquid became visible. Grendel startled at Devon's voice, seemingly unaware he wasn't alone. Observing Grendel, Devon noticed he was still in pain, although he no longer resembled a walking spectre. "No, I'm..." Grendel's voice trailed off as he turned back around, resting his head on his knees. Devon felt a growing sense of intrusion and considered leaving, but before he could step away, Grendel abruptly turned his head. "There's something I wanted you to do." After listening to Grendel, Devon felt a knot forming in his stomach. "Yeah, no problem," he replied with a feigned confidence that he didn't truly feel. Merely half an hour had passed, and Grendel was already asking him for that. Devon was certain there was only a slim 15% chance of surviving this request. However, the thought of refusing didn't even occur to him. At least Grendel hadn't asked him to take someone's life. He would have said no to that. As Devon moved to depart, Grendel called out, fixing him with wide, pleading eyes. "Thank you," Grendel softly said, genuine sincerity in his voice. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't helped." Devon nodded, relieved that Grendel hadn't asked for something more sinister. Despite his internal conflict, he knew he wouldn't be able to deny Grendel's request. "Oh, and one more thing," Grendel started to ask. "Get Milo for you." Devon interjected, finishing Grendel's sentence. "Yeah,